real conversations, and some hard truths. Gangs, drugs, and guns. Giving a voice to those willing to sacrifice. We have stories that need to be told. We have lessons that need to be taught. Protect and serve. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. Hey everybody, welcome back. Nathan Romas with you. Today we are going to be talking about leadership and EDI, or equity, diversity, inclusion implementation within organizations. For that, I have Enyinnah Okere on the podcast, or E for short. He is the Chief Operations Officer in the Office of the Chief for the Edmonton Police Service. He oversees the leadership, vision, and strategic direction of the corporate communications, the value and impact divisions, and the partnership and stakeholder development branch. A focus of his work includes bolstering public relations and upholding organizational transparency. Both he and his wife, Michelle Okere, were both named top 40 under 40 by Edify magazine in 2021. I'm going to ask what happened in 2022 when we get into it. But he also recently gave a TED Talk in Calgary, which I'll post a link to as well once we get this up, because I recommend people go and check that out. But welcome, E.
Hey, thank you for having me, bro.
And that's, yes, this is E's real voice. I've turned the bass off. The treble's all the way up. So, but one thing I did want to ask, actually, just right off the top. Yeah, so you got named top 40 under 40. What does that kind of entail? Like when you get told you're getting this, what happens?
Yeah, it's a little surreal. So you end up getting, they notify you that you're one of the top 40 as for Edify magazine. So I found out like in the morning, and I knew my wife was nominated. I figured she was going to win because I'll be honest, she's the actual talent in the family. So when I found out, I'm like, oh, there's no way they'll do both of us. So I was like, hey, by the way, I won this thing. She's like, very happy for me. And then an hour later, she's like, hey, they called me. I won it too. I'm like, oh, this is surprising because honestly, it was in 2021. We moved here in 2019. Mm-hmm. So I was still figuring out even just neighborhoods within the city of Edmonton, let alone expecting anything like that. But it was very humbling. You get the call, then someone will interview you to kind of find out a little more about your story, and then they put it within the Edify magazine. And then what you end up doing is they have a banquet at the end of the year that you go there and you kind of bring some guests, but you see the other top 40. And it ends up being a really cool group of Edmontonians, pretty young, that have some outsized impact on the city. And the foundation is a lot of them are still giving back to their community. And I think that's just really cool to see it highlight.
That's very cool. And do you get a vacation or anything out of it?
No vacation.
We're putting all the hard work in.
Yeah, you just continue to put the hard work in, and you'd be surprised about the reach of the magazine. So sometimes you'll just have people looking at you funny, and like I get that a little bit, but it's like, okay, but were you in this? I'm like, oh, okay, you actually read that. So
yeah,
but there's no vacation, there's no trip. There is just that feeling of intrinsic motivation being kind of satisfied in terms of kind of people recognize work that you're putting in.
Yeah, totally. And you get some amazing connections in there too, right? So you just keep it going.
Absolutely.
Well, maybe we'll get into your story. And I know you talked a little bit about this in your TED Talk, but can you start at the beginning? Just tell us about you, where you're from, and how you got to where you are now.
For sure. I'll give kind of a brief version, but so I was born in Nigeria. With my mother, my sister, my father. He came to Canada to finish his PhD, and we were in Nigeria for a while. So when we first immigrated, we immigrated to Guelph, Ontario. This would have been back in the 90s, and that was a real shift for me because I think I've referenced in other places, when you're in a country like Nigeria, you differentiate yourself by tribe, which is kind of language spoken, religion. But when everyone is Black, you don't really think about it. The world doesn't actually change, you know what I mean? And then coming to Canada, it was kind of a culture shock and a shell shock, really, for me and my family. But it was, and I'm so grateful that we did make that move. an incredible kind of opportunity to grow. Like almost all of my family still back home in Nigeria. So it was just our nuclear family that did come. So I went through, did elementary school in Ontario, then moved out to Saskatchewan for high school and university. I was a CIS university track athlete about 80 pounds ago. And I took political science, actually, was my major in university, which led me to working at the legislature. So I started at the legislature fresh out of university, thinking, you know everything, and you're thinking about all these theories of things, and then real life kind of punches you in the face of people have very different, regardless of what the academic theory may be. Application of these things and actually working with community members, working with legislators is very different. But I was able to kind of navigate up my career to be the director of research for the government caucus office, which is all the elected officials who aren't cabinet ministers. They the caucus office. And from there, I went to be a chief of staff to the Minister of Corrections and Policing. And that's actually where my first real intersection with policing was, through kind of the government lens.
Okay.
I was the minister at the time, was a former police officer, and the deputy minister that I started working with was a then just retired police chief, Dale McPhee.
Mm-hmm.
Just a little side story, and I'll make this part really quick.
Yeah.
Our first interaction was not good. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, we had some differences of opinions on a few things, but eventually there was a day that something went wrong, and I'm like, okay, well, my career is over, and I'm like, you know what? If it's gonna go down, I might as well go down to the blaze of glory. So I'm like, I'm gonna go slug it out with this guy. And I didn't do my research. I didn't know he led the league in like penalty minutes in the WHL. So I thought I was gonna get a fair one on an old man, and it was not like that. So we had a very spirited and good conversation about actually what we're trying to do, what problems we're trying to solve from the kind of the elected side versus kind of the ministry side. And that really opened my eyes to kind of a lot of the different ways that policing intersects with the human services and affects the community. But while I was doing that, you still only see policing at a very high level. Like, I would interact with either retired police officers or retired police chiefs that would hold senior executive positions. So you're looking at it through one very particular lens. So I did that, had a few more portfolios within the government of Saskatchewan, and then in 2019, Chief McPhee was selected to be the chief for the Edmonton Police Service, and wanted to bring a lot of the work that we were doing for the government of Saskatchewan, especially with the blending of public health, law enforcement, real strong focus on community. How do we bring that to Edmonton at a very local level? So that was really at a high level my journey to the city of Edmonton, working for EPS.
Awesome. Well, and you know what? I really like a bunch of the themes that you pick up in there, where you're talking about the different perspectives, the different dynamic between you and the chief, because I think that, well, even if we talk about front lines today, they only see it through one lens as well, right? So how do we make that connection between the leadership, the executive level, and those frontline people? So, we'll definitely get into all that here. Is there anything that's kind of surprised you the most about being in this law enforcement world?
Yeah, I think I would say two things. How much the folks who do this actually care about the community and how seriously they take it. Like, I was ignorant to that. Like, you would meet, chiefs that they were successful in kind of what they were doing as executives, and they would have come up through the ranks, but you don't get kind of that critical mass of meeting a whole lot of kind of getting that frontline perspective. So upon coming here, I was extremely pleasantly surprised and actually just quite grateful in terms of how seriously people took their jobs, how seriously, like, the deep connections that they end up having with whether it be folks that like say SROs, and someone was an SRO 10 years ago, and they remember a lot of the students that they play basketball with, they had connections with, whether it be through domestic violence and like just the deep core relationships that are built through this profession. And there's not very many like it that you see people who deal with folks at their worst moment,
Yeah.
whether it be you're a victim or you're an offender, and the fact that something positive can build from that is a very it's I just don't think that gets celebrated and talked about enough, and talked about in times where things are good, not as a rebuttal to a lot of the criticism policing has received,
Okay.
at least through my here. So being more active and speaking about those things. And I think that's a culture shift that needs to happen, in terms of it's not that you're spending all the time tooting your own horn, but I think this profession would be served by society really knowing what goes into it, the good, bad, and ugly. And I think that's some of the work that you're doing in terms of your podcast, in terms of getting stories out there so that there are to challenge some of the dominant perspectives.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely, well, even doing this, like you're saying, it's been different, I guess, to say the least. It's an interesting world when you have to kind of walk a bunch of different lines. And I mean, being at your level, I know you have the greater organization to kind of look out for, but you as a person also want to say your piece, right? And sometimes that might conflict with what the organization needs to do. So I think it's a real battle trying to figure out, like, how do I say this
Mhm.
and kind of stay true to myself. And I'll get into kind of like the leadership stuff when we talk about that. How do I say something while remaining true to myself or, my beliefs, but while also supporting the organization and, not walking us into a bunch of lawsuits or whatever, or
Yeah.
complaints or whatever we might get.
Yeah.
So what, at your level, what would be like, what is one of the biggest, maybe I don't know if I say disappointments, but one of the biggest dislikes of what you have to do on the day to day? So you're heavily involved in communications, but is there anything that, maybe you got there and you're like, wow, this is probably the worst part of this job?
I would say, and I'll probably take it back to even the when I was overseeing CSWB. I think some of the tougher parts was actually the deluge or the amount of meetings that we had when it came through, like the perpetual council meetings.
Okay.
There was a lot of there was a lot of time spent in front of kind of elected officials that I think it was important, and that's what the service needed at the time. Communicating where we're going as a service, the changes that we're making, or the changes that we aren't making because we believe this is proper police work. But some of that time, especially with me being so new to the service, I would have loved to have spent that time instead really getting to know more people and more parts of the service.
Mm,
So is you come in at say my level as an executive, but you haven't come up through the ranks in the particular organization. A lot of my colleagues have the benefit of I've worked in all of these sections or I know some of these people, but the ability to kind of relationship build, it kind of gets hamstrung when, well, you're dealing with an existential crisis like we were with policing and a lot of the defund movement over the last few years. So some of the things, like just the sheer corporate things that are required to do, I know that's my job and that's why I get paid. But it does come at a sacrifice of it's taken, I'll be getting into year 5 in April, and we're
yeah.
almost getting to start having these conversations now because you were just so deep in a bunker dealing with that kind of thing.
Yeah. And that's the thing that a lot of people say to us, even on the street. You're paid to get yelled at or paid to get punched or something. It's like, you know what? I didn't sign up for that specifically. I get that's going to be a part of the job at some point.
Mhm.
However, if I didn't spend my time doing these things, I could be doing so much better out there, right? So I get what you're saying. It's just a matter of time allocation where you can make some impact. Um, so overall, though, it's been going good, I guess. You've been here 5 years now? Yeah,
Yeah,
5 years.
it would be April 2024 will be 5 years. So it's, yeah, well, 4 and 3/4.
Is there any particular areas of policing that you haven't been yet that maybe are of interest to you, or that you really maybe aspire to go toward?
So for the last 3 years, I was in community safety and well-being, and believe it or not, that bureau, as it was then, had quite a wide gamut that I was able to see. So from the serious crimes branch to the social navigation branch, kind of very different, but some of the core principles are still the same in terms of working with different community partners, investigations of domestic violence or sexual assault. So I've gotten to see a lot of kind of that partnership and stakeholder, um, like policing. I think just some things that are pure interest. It doesn't mean I want to go anywhere near them. I just think some of these things look cool. It would be
Yeah.
some of the things in your world, in DC LaForce's bureau, getting to see a lot more of the work in training as well, recruit training. Um, and especially with how competitive that's going to be over these next few years with every kind of first responder front line facing organization, from teaching to EMS to policing, is struggling to recruit. So making sure we're getting
Yeah.
there and seeing what we're doing to kind of build that next generation, that is of interest to me, but that doesn't mean I necessarily want to go there. But I think I'm hoping now that we've come to a close, or there's a reprieve with a lot of the funding formula discussions, and the politics of policing is dying down a little. That'll give me an opportunity to kind of dig into these other areas and really just see like what the great folks that we do have there are doing, just for my own personal development and learning more. Because the more I know and the more I actually see, the better I'm able to communicate when I do have to go in front of whether it be the police commission or whether it be council or the province, etc. That makes me better at my job. So those are my kind of my selfish interests.
Yeah, well, I would say even when it dies down, though, I mean, the policing world now from being in your position. I mean, it only dies down for so long. So you're gonna have to be fast and furious when you're out there learning.
Bro, there's been no break.
Yeah,
There's been no break. Like I was just a couple weeks ago, my wife and I and took our family up on vacation in Kananaskis, and I ran into a former colleague. He's a deputy minister for corrections and policing in Sask, and the first thing he said when he saw me, he's like, "Hey, how are you guys doing in Edmonton? Like, you guys have had no break." I'm like, "Yeah, there's been no off season."
yeah,
It from one thing to the other. And I think it speaks to the kind of collective resiliency of the organization, even when it feels hard or it can feel bitter. There has been a lot that's happened in a very compressed time period. And the fact that folks, still show up for the most part, do their job, do it to the best of their ability, really care about their files.
mhm,
That speaks to kind of the character of the people that we do hire. But yeah, it has been a gauntlet.
yeah. Well, and so from your point of view, though, it's kind of died down. Is there still a lot of talk about defunding, or is there a lot of talk about any other issues that police have had over the years lately? Like, is there one specific one that's still around?
But I think the appetite and tolerance for the defund conversation has waned. I think it's I, I'm thinking that as a society we're going to be past that. That doesn't mean the police accountability discussion isn't going to go away, and nor should it ever. But I think that part has passed. Where we are right now is really what we are going to do as a society when it comes to social disorder.
Yeah,
What are we going when it comes to the encampments, when it comes to the open air drug use, that has really taken over a lot of kind of Western Canada, Western parts of the North America. And how do we address these things? Like, we know that, I mean, you were at the Safer Cities Conference,
yep,
or City of Our Cities Conference, and you see that of all major cities, Edmonton leads the nation with kind of meth in the wastewater. That is very dangerous, not only for the individuals who are using the meth, but for regular citizens and the police officers who are tasked to kind of interdicting and interacting with that. So we are still kind of right now. I think there's a larger societal discussion of what it is that we're going to tolerate, and then how we're going to be able to address some of these issues. There's different provinces, different municipalities that have been going in multiple directions, but I think as a city here in Edmonton, that's going to be the really hot button issue over these next few years.
hmm
How do we address disorder? And then on top of that, how do we bring accountability back within the criminal justice system, so that we're not going through a revolving door. That's something we all have to own, from policing to the judiciary through the prosecutions, etc. We all have to own that. But I think Edmontonians and citizens are going to be focusing on that.
Yeah, and you know what? That conference I found it very valuable, mainly for the fact that you had so many people from across the U.S., across Canada. We have people from Phoenix, San Francisco.
Yep.
There was Dallas. And then we had across, like, Toronto and Vancouver's big cities here, and just kind of there's a couple things I guess you can kind of take comfort in knowing that other people are going through the same thing,
Sometimes worse.
and yeah, and sometimes worse. So we can look at those people though, and those cities and go, yeah, maybe we're doing the same thing they are. Like maybe we should stop.
Mm.
um, but it also gave you a lot of different ideas for how to tackle these things. Kind of like you saying, there's so many people going in different directions. Who's doing what? The thing that's working, or at least looks like it's working. And like, let's not be afraid to change. Let's kind of try something different. So yeah, I thought it was a really good conference for those reasons.
It's good.
Maybe one thing I'll kind of pick up on there is the leadership aspect. So we need people like, you're in an area with big personalities and big ideas. And like you're saying, you see things from like a very high level perspective. So on your end of things, how do you find, or what type of leadership do you think you need to uh, maybe implement some of these ideas? Because you get it from all sides. I guess you get, you're battling the defund thing. So you got to argue with the city about stuff of the provincial interests. You've got all the special interest groups. So how do you yourself, kind of stay the course, and kind of the things I was saying previously, how do you kind of stay true to yourself and guide the organization in the right direction, or what you see as the right direction?
No, I think that's a very good and big question. So I think I'll try to break it down into two parts. The first thing is like listening. So for me, I have a very particular lens, and I think it speaks to the diversity conversation that you and I'm hoping that we really get into here.
Yeah.
But I have a very particular lens and experience when it comes to leading, I guess, large, whether it be organizations or trying to achieve kind of big goals. So for me, it's knowing that it's going to be a bit of a marathon, and you have to have the emotional and mental endurance and stamina to be able to continue to do this when not only do the people that you're tasked with leading, they may not buy in at first,
Yeah.
but the folks that are on the other side of you as well, that may have a different opinion or do not want to see it succeed, because there's some people who just do not want to see it succeed. Like even speaking about kind of getting into community safety and well-being, and which is something that the service was doing before, but like I think we took it to the next level over these last few years. There were folks who did not want to see that, like police abolitionists, because they were saying that this was the antidote to the defund movement, that the police would just start working with the social agencies. And that was the antithesis of what they wanted, because what they wanted was abolition and
Yeah.
strike it down. So you have to, I think, be able to listen to feedback, make sure that we can connect with the people that we task with doing these things. So like I'm always aware of writing a check that someone else has to cash, because I would hate when people for me. But if you don't have that North Star and kind of what that end game is going to be, it'll burn you out. So there was a story about I think it was a POW in Vietnam that was captured. And there was a few American POWs captured, and a lot of them were thinking, okay, by Christmas we'll get out, by Easter we'll get out. And they eventually they broke down. And this gentleman, and I'll get the name, but this gentleman was very, very aware of his current situation. So he's grounded in reality, but never lost hope that he's going to get to this destination.
Hmm.
And I think that's a very principle that I try to kind of live and lead by, that you can be ruthlessly aware of what's in front of you, that, hey, this is very hard, or right now we might not have buy-in here. We're seeing pockets of success here, and you can understand what this is, but be very firm on getting to that destination point. And I think you can, if you have a little wiggle room to be able to actually get in different ideas, or perhaps, hey, if we're both trying to get here, why don't we try it this way?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm flexible there, but if we know we're just trying to get to, and for me, the end goal of a police services that focus on balance and support and enforcement, that we need to be able to hold people accountable, but we also have to hold ourselves accountable. That's kind of my focus. But and I'll say, because I think you have a follow-up question, I also think about things about degrees of dissatisfaction. And Rich Flaman said that when we were working together, he's like, you know what, if both sides are kind of mad at you that they haven't gotten everything that they wanted, you're probably doing a good enough job. So I think about it in that sense as well.
Yeah. Well, you know what? And I like the part where you're talking about, you got to be open to feedback, and kind of like you're saying, your first meeting with the chief, you probably didn't think you'd be here, at least not in that moment. You didn't think you'd be here working with him. So, you got to be open to people that criticize or critique, and take that critically, and listen. And I've said this on the here before with a lot of people in these leadership discussions, and I think this is a good lesson for politics nowadays anyways. We might disagree on how we're getting to the end goal, but we're all trying to get to this point. If you think I should put, 70 cents of every dollar into whatever the issue is, and the other person thinks it's 30 cents, it's like, okay, maybe we'll find the middle ground somewhere, right? Like, we don't have to agree right on point. So yeah, no, you're spot on with that. Do you think nowadays, in the world we're in, where everything is just, headlines and clickbait and Twitterverse, can we find good, strong leaders? Do you think that's a dying, guess not characteristic, but a dying quality of people? Because I find it hard to see a lot of the time, but I wonder if that's just maybe because of the internet and everything, so much of it gets drowned out, that the really good people don't necessarily come to the top all the time. It's kind of hard to find them, or few and far between.
So I think there are a couple different things there. I think right now, if I was to ask you about who great leaders are, you're probably some people that you think of, regardless of rank, wherever they are. So I still think that they exist.
Hmm.
But I do think that we live in a world that people are making the value judgment on, do I want everything that comes with this for my family,
Okay.
for myself? So it's not I think people want to lead if you want to make things better around you, really help the people that you're tasked with leading. I think that's important. I don't think that's gone away, that everyone becomes so kind of Machiavellian that it is, you have 100% of people thinking the ends justify the means,
Yeah.
and you be as cutthroat as you want. But I think for public facing positions, that's where the lack of decorum in our society, and I think the denigration of really the social contract of how we actually connect with each other, deal with each other. Some people who I think would be great elected officials, would be great public sector leaders, might think, yeah, but I don't want, if I make a mistake or I make a decision this person doesn't like, they come yell at me and my wife when I'm walking down the
Yeah.
street. And I think that's actually the biggest place that things have changed, is in kind of the level of respect that we show each other, even if we disagree. And we can vehemently disagree, but as you were saying earlier, we're talking about how to get to a certain destination. But I think we lose the plot in terms of the destination when it goes into, how do we go at attacking each other, and what's going to be the most successful way to bring someone down or humiliate someone
Yeah.
who's interested in trying to do a public service. And I think that part of forward-facing leadership, I do hope that there are still more people who want to put their name forward, whether it be to be elected officials, whether they want to move up in our organization, that knowing that their job is going to require them to be more and more forward-facing. But as a society, we give each other less grace.
Mm.
Like we forget about the collective humanity, that you can make mistakes or you can change your mind.
Yes, that's a big one.
Yes, I can take new information and, oh my Lord, I didn't think about it from that perspective. Perhaps the world isn't as cut and dry. And we don't give that grace for leaders to do that because it's, okay, well, you're a flip flopper, yada, yada, yada. Then what would ever be my incentive to actually listen?
Yeah. Well, and you know what? One thing is, I know sometimes, the chief puts out videos or anyone at the executive level, and people are very quick to jump on a certain word or how something might have been said. But with that, I just think, like, if I put a recording device on anybody, they're going to be saying stupid things all day. So they probably don't want to know what they themselves say. So yeah, it's given that grace for people to mess up, or maybe you just don't know the way, someone intended something to come out and it came out a different way. Um, One of the things I wanted to do, maybe just like a hard pivot, if we can, toward the DEI side of things, because this is a really interesting topic. And I think a lot of the meaning's been hijacked and people got so many different ways to look at it. Um, what is, what do you see that as in a policing context, and how do you implement it? I want to say safely, but if you could kind of give listeners, what is your version of DEI and how should it be implemented in a policing world?
Okay, and I'll say this is one particular view, but I will, like, my focus on diversity, especially, and I'll also focus on diversity and inclusion. If we have time, we'll get to the equity portion.
Mhm.
But diversity for me is your range of thinking, your background. There is also demographic diversity. So if we're talking about me being a Nigerian black man, or someone being a woman, or a member of, say, the LGBTQ2S plus community, and also like experience. So whether, like, for me, I think about my experience and how this really mattered in a policing context was I worked in government.
Mhm.
So over these last 4 years, as we're having discussions on how to navigate the politics within policing, I worked in politics. This is something that I tangibly bring to this floor.
Yeah.
I'm not a police officer, but I have police officers that work with me, and they have their experience on how we should be navigating things. And we can actually talk those things out. Like, I think when we speak about diversity being strength, there's a part of that sentence that's omitted that I think would probably help the conversation in terms of tension.
Mm.
There is also a tension with diversity. If I was working with a whole room of people that have my background and I got along with, boy, that would make us do things really fast. We'd be really efficient. But there might not be any new ideas coming in.
Yeah.
There might not be the real tension that would actually cause the group to grow. So there is a difficulty in diversity that I think we should acknowledge, but the intent is under that tension, that's where the strength happens.
Yes.
So, like, I'm a meathead. I think about time under tension when I'm bench pressing. I think about like that when working out, and that's how muscles grow. That is how you get better, but you have to be skillful at navigating that. So for a police service, like, we can speak about the community relations aspect of it. It's really important to have the support of your community. When you don't have the support of your community, it does actually have some real life, real impacts on the service, whether it be at the very local level of the kind of legitimacy at a stop,
Yeah.
or at an interaction, or just walking through the mall in uniform, or at the very high level as what we saw in terms of the defund movement. So those things matter, and they also do matter in terms of officer safety as well. having that relationship, having that respect from the community, that two-way street really, really impacts the way you're able to do your job. But when we speak about diversity, and especially the inclusion part, I don't think we talk enough personally about what that actually means. If we're working on a team together, you and I want you to be able to bring the best of yourself to that. All of your ideas feel psychologically safe that you can throw out an idea and this might be a moonshot. And if it doesn't work, I'm not going to get canned for it,
Yeah.
or I'm not going to be revealed for it. But if it does work, now we have something that we didn't have before because you weren't afraid to talk about it. And the way it works in my mind within a police organization or any large organization is I think we have things called status groups.
Hmm.
So this has been, you probably had it in high school, university, elementary. There are in groups and there are out groups. And for me, it really doesn't matter the racial makeup of said in group or the racial makeup of said out group. If we are doing things in a way that I have a whole bunch of people in my position of power, that I have a whole bunch of people that I'm comfortable with, and I'm going to systematically block the people who aren't, or the people who aren't in my kind of inner circle,
Hmm.
that is a very bad thing. That is not being inclusive. And
Yeah.
we can, I think, on that, regardless of if I told you what that group was made out of, like in terms of the representation. So being inclusive and finding different ways to literally get the best out of the people that are next to you, the people who are above you in the org chart, below you in the org chart, is the actual job of leadership. And I don't want to continue to complicate it with the kind of the gotcha stuff that's been taking place, or
Yeah.
the really, really, really focusing on the evolution of language. Those things matter. But if we can get the basics of, I want you to feel comfortable, working with me. I want you to feel like you can be your best self working with me, and I can too. That is how we get better as an organization.
Yeah. And you know what? I think that you have a good point where we're talking about like, don't want to take the natural flow of people in and out of groups, and take that natural movement of them away when we just put hard lines like, I need this percentage of this, race, ethnicity, sex, whatever it is, to be in this group. Now it makes it awkward a lot of the time, but you also, that I think is where you lose that natural flow of that diversity coming in and out. I mean, it's almost built right into the fabric of our society where we do include people. And I get there's pockets where someone might not have grown up with any black people in their school, but just by natural interactions and curiosity, you're going to come across those people in your life. And if the person's an ass, then okay, well, that's, people have a right to be like that. But I don't think we have to put hard lines on, we have to have X amount of this in the organization or X amount in this unit. um, I think a lot of the conversation's been hijacked in the sense that, and I'll say even agency taken away from people over their own careers, where to a point where you get a female who gets a job in the organization, say in a promoted rank, people are very quick to jump on the narrative of, well, she only got it because she's female, and it instantly delegitimizes that person, even if they did a ton of good work and did a ton of things to get there. So as the leader in the organization and working in the comm stuff, how do you kind of manage those, uh, I guess, those conversations that people might have, or the narratives that they're put out there?
Yeah. I mean, if someone is, and I do know that kind of stuff gets said. I know that stuff gets said about me. Like I'm yeah, they talk about kind of the token person, yada yada
Yeah.
yada. But if someone is going to say that, I don't know if there's much. Like if you're going to open your mouth to say that, there's much I can do for you in terms of applying energy.
Mm.
What I think about when it comes to that female who is being promoted into the rank is what that means in terms of motivation for others who may not have thought
Okay.
that. So I'll give you a personal example for me. Like, you grow up and like you see kind of in pop culture how people of color, with black people and black men are depicted. And for me, not watching, it wasn't until really seeing Barack Obama
Mm.
that I saw a black man suit on TV celebrated on a regular basis. Now, that doesn't mean because I hadn't seen that, that he should have been president. He earned being president. But it does find a way that once you see someone do it, then it becomes real.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of intrinsic motivator really serves a purpose. Now, when it comes to you're talking about a quote on a certain place, my focus is not on a certain amount in a certain place. It's on, are we doing what we can to remove the barriers for people to get to that destination? So it's not that I'm going to just place you there. It is, I'm making sure that if you are competing for it, that there is no artificial barrier in your way
Yeah.
to doing it. And on top of that, how can we also encourage people to try new things and give them support to do that while still making it a fair competition for everyone? Because I think everyone wants to be able to compete and achieve things and earn things off your own merit, because there's a reason I'm sure you don't have any of the participation ribbons that you got from elementary school track.
Yeah.
You didn't go home to show your parents that. No, everything that really matters and you feel is earned. As leaders, let's make sure that we're just having people to the best of their ability, starting from the same starting line to run their race.
Hmm.
And if you beat me, you beat me. And now I got to look at what do I got to do to get to that finish line faster. But it's not that you're running the 100-meter dash and I'm running the 110 hurdles.
Yeah.
And I think that's the focus for anyone in terms of, and we're not really speaking about solely demographic diversity, but anyone in our organization. If you have an end that you want to meet, what are we doing to ensure that we're removing barriers, we're making fair competitions, and that we're not creating spaces that those who already are in the positions are only bringing those who they care about along. And I will say I have been very, very surprised and heartened to just hear anecdotal stories from folks talking about mentoring this woman or mentoring this man. And like people are doing that informally. So I think as an organization, we are doing some of these things. I think we need to step up in the mentorship program and that exchange of ideas, exchange of kind of cultures, even between sport and civilian. It will make you better in the long run, not only for your organization, but whatever you choose to do after that too, because this is an organization where after 25 years, especially depending on when you get on, you still have a whole career after that.
Yeah.
Why would you shut down the opportunity to get in as much information and experience from other people to only add that to your tool belt and then take that to whether it be your duties now or your duties in the future, or really just kind of who you are as a person?
Yeah. Well, and across your experiences, so even going back to Saskatchewan, uh, have you seen, or can you give like some examples of any sort of barriers or things that you have dealt with or you've seen others deal with? Because for me, I'm thinking, like, I get that there's racism out there. I get that there's a lot of bad people out there that will throw up blocks and maybe do certain things. But then when I hear when we talk about like systemic racism and lots of people making apologies for systemic racism, I can get behind the historical context and making apologies. But when the RCMP Commissioner Lucky went in front of House of Commons or whatever group it was she was saying it on, and she says, we are a systemically racist organization. Like, well, what are you talking about, right? I'm thinking that, and then somebody actually asked her, well, can you give us an example? Like, what do you mean? And then she just kind of bumbled around for a while. Um, I'm wondering, like, where does this exist right now? Because it's kind of just left out there like this boogeyman kind of hanging around. It's like, okay, but where is it, or what are we talking about?
No, that's a good question. And I think I'll say racism does exist in our society. I think we can agree on that.
Yeah.
And I think policing is no different, that it will exist within pockets because we have human beings who come to policing.
Yeah.
But when we were having this discussion of how this kind of impacts lives, I don't know if you remember, but it must have been in 2020, and this was in Quebec. There was an Indigenous woman who came to the hospital saying that she was experiencing pain. And my recollection was the nurses were just assumed that she was drunk,
Hmm.
and she was a drunk Indigenous woman. And she was there. She put them on Facebook Live, and she was still trying to communicate about her pain. And no one took her seriously. And then that woman died. And we didn't really have a large conversation about kind of racism within healthcare when that happened. Like the focus was squarely on police. But there are aspects when you have power, your bias and your view towards certain groups of people does have an ability to impact lives,
Hmm.
whether it be lending at a bank, whether it be different educational outcomes in terms of ability to, in terms of, yeah, education. There are, this happens within our system. Now, we can't just throw our hands out and just say the entire system is racist, therefore we don't have to, or that's just what it is. No, there still also has to be, like within that conversation, individual agency, individual accountability
Yeah.
to be able to try to make things better for yourself. Like for me as kind of a Black man, or me in a leadership position. So I don't think we should be afraid to have the conversation, but I think definitely how it was interpreted was everyone in this system is overtly racist, which is a very, very different thing
Yeah.
than what I'm speaking. And I firmly don't believe that. And I don't think anyone with any actual sense would believe that. But back to what I was speaking about in terms of barriers, there are some things that we have within our system. Like even if you look at the Indian Act and being able to own land on reserve, being able to have some sort of capital when it comes to now I want to go to get a loan, or I
Hmm.
want to start a business. Those kinds of things still exist within the system that definitely has some outcomes when it comes to financial outcomes down the road. There are things that we can look at. And I think there are people who are in positions of power that should be doing that. But I think the conversation gets diluted when it becomes this everyone is racist, or no, no, we're not. And you're having this kind of argument as opposed to what can we,
Yeah, the extremes.
at the extreme poles of the argument, instead of what can we do to connect with each other better? What can we do to encourage inclusion? What can we do to actually bring down the temperature? Like everything has been on 11 out of 10 for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Bring down the temperature and get to know your neighbor. Get to know and disagree with your neighbor, but you might still say hi when you see them in the driveway. And I think that's what we're losing in this, that there our collective humanity and willingness and ability to connect with one another is lost when everything is a 140 character soundbite that you're trying to dunk on each other and rage farm on Twitter. Meanwhile, this has some very real impacts on individuals who work within those systems,
Yeah.
trying to make things better within that system.
Yeah. And you know what? And applying that to the justice system and the job I do, and I've had this conversation I hear a million times as well, just talking about these stats, like these very simple stats, superficial talking points, all being applied in our world. And you see it um, in like say parole and probation, where I've had people in those offices tell me we won't keep this person in jail because they're this race or whatever it might be. And my thought process is, but you're going to release them. They go back to their own community 9 times out of 10.
You're going to harm.
So it's just cyclical. You're actually harming that community that you don't want people from in jail. So I'm going to go back in that community again. So I'm there twice as much. I'm talking, dealing with them twice as much, twice as many street checks, twice as many arrests, or whatever it might equate
Yep.
to. So that's one of the big things that I think that's one part of the system that is playing in the extreme right now, where we need to bring it back. And I guess they're doing some things with that bill C-75.
Yeah,
No,
48 replacing 75.
48 replacing it. Yeah.
No, and I think I think that's very astute because you lose the plot when you start with the premise of an overrepresentation within the justice system. Okay, what can you do to make that better instead of just throwing the baby out with the bathwater? And I
Mm.
think that's what we ended up having, as well as the perfect storm of COVID, where nobody was going to jail. But if you're thinking about in this very abstract academic way of by virtue of not having this individual who is a violent offender in jail, you're somehow that leads to reconciliation. Well, what about the indigenous women that they may go murder after?
Yes.
And what about the other marginalized people that they may actually interact with after? We're serving them up. And I don't think we're doing the communities a good service when, for some people, jail is the answer. And in that jail, I hope that the expectation is there should be proper rehabilitation within those systems, but you should be separated from society and there should be accountability for kind of you should pay your debt to society for what you've done. For other people, we do need to get them into whether it be proper addictions treatment, proper mental health treatment, and ensure that they can be closest or close to kind of their best self. But those are two very simple, separate things. And just saying we're throwing our hands up and saying, well, we're just not going to jail anyone or we're not going to move for any kind of accountability because some professor says so is
Mhm.
a little much for me.
Yeah. And I think those are all solid points. Maybe we'll just we're getting to the end of our time. I want to make sure you got time to talk about what you're currently involved in, any projects on the go, anything kind of coming down the pipeline.
EPS or outside.
Either one or both. I know you're busy.
You know what? I'll talk about outside. So my wife and I and another couple started this not-for-profit. It's called the REET Institute, and we started it in 2021. And it's called Real Estate Education and Thought Leadership, but it's a play on like an investment REIT.
Mm.
And it was to get kids of color into commercial real estate. Quite frankly, so it is a case competition. It's an 8-week program in which, like in Edmonton, we take them tour Rogers Arena. We take them all through the Ice District.
Mm.
Just get to really show kids that and the youth and the scholars that there is a whole set of careers here that you might not have known about because like I lived in apartments growing up. I didn't know someone owned the apartment. We just kind of you just lived
Yeah.
there. If someone owned and managed this mall, you just kind of show up to these things. So showing them about kind of the diversity of jobs that exist within commercial real estate. And then we break them into teams in which they get mentors from the U of A as well as mentors from different commercial firms that get to just meet. So now they're building networking skills. So over 8 weeks, they learn kind of financial literacy. They learn how to they learn their public presentation skills because I don't know if they get that much in schools now with schools kind of, yeah, I just don't know if they get that much in schools.
Mhm.
And then, Dragon's Den style case competition that the winning team wins up to $10,000 in kind of scholarships. So we've had kids who were Syrian refugees a few years ago that have just won the last cohort. We're expanding to Calgary now. We've had kids who had just moved from Tibet
Wow.
who are who were competing and English wasn't their first language. We have from our first 2 cohorts now, some that graduated university and now working in commercial real estate, graduated high school, sorry, and now working in commercial real estate at the firms that their mentors were working at. So that kind of work really kind of warms my heart because like for me growing up, it was either be a doctor or a lawyer. You didn't really know. Yeah, you didn't really know about all the jobs there. And I think it's just the coolest thing of just creating an opportunity for people to get to know each other and really practice that inclusion and see where things go. So even if they don't work in commercial real estate, I don't really care. But at the age of 16, 17, getting to just connect with adults,
Yep.
for the adults getting with kind of what the next generation is and just having some fun and learning, that is going to be taking up a lot of my time, but I love it.
Awesome. Well, yeah, make sure I'll get you send that link over if you got a website or anything, because I'll be sure to put that up in the episode description.
Cool.
Yeah, and where can people follow you and your work?
You can follow the at REET Institute, REET, common spelling of institute. And then on Social media, not really much on Twitter, but because it's a cesspool. I believe it is at COO_OKERE. And then I'm on LinkedIn. That seems to be the last bastion of sane conversations before
Yeah.
the Twitter folks move over.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on today. I'll get links up for all those so people can take a look at your work and follow you. Yeah, thanks very much for coming on here, and hang on the line for a second. I'll say bye offline.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, man.